Beginning with reports by veteran federal investigators, we see that for 18 months preceding 9/11, Saudi intelligence agents harbored and supported the 9/11 hijackers in every conceivable fashion. We will learn how the operation was funded, how their handlers led the hijackers to flight training on Boeing airliners in the Arizona desert, and how they devised an air attack that defeated the world's most sophisticated defense system. And skipping over, suspiciously enough, the vice president's former corporation was well positioned to provide massive logistical services to 100,000 U.S. troops for a relatively quick deployment. He also fed America a stream of false intelligence about weapons of mass destruction and embellished links between Saddam Hussein and bin Laden during an urgent rush to war. Our guest for the remaining 3 hours of tonight's program is Captain Philip Marshall. We will get to him after a brief break. Please stand by. Sustained inverted flight will continue for the duration of the program on Coast to Coast AM. Without further ado, let us bring on to the bridge of the mothership, the one, the only, Captain Philip Marshall. Welcome, sir.
Hello, John. How are you tonight?
I'm doing all right. Your book is absolutely fascinating. It really is. It's so well written. It's very articulate, and it's clever, and it's scary as hell. Where would you like to start on this? Car bombers did what? Or this is some amazing stuff, and I have it's one of those works you just want to linger over, because not only is it well written, but you can't believe what you're reading. So, how were these novice pilots able to fly as competently as they did? Because I couldn't jump into the left seat of any of these aircraft, take a look at the POH and do my thing. When we talked earlier, I said, yeah, sure, give me a basic idea of the controls. Let me look at the pilot's operating handbook for a minute. You go, well, look, here's the thing. When you shove those throttles forward, you better know what you're doing, because that thing is going to take off like a rocket, and you're not just going to be able to fly this thing like a little Cessna and just make it do what you want. This aircraft has to be managed. So how did these guys do this, and where did they receive their training, and who arranged that?
Yeah, that was the first thing that really raised a red flag for me, was when I got the NTSB reports and saw the flight patterns, and the black box recordings and all that are very, very accurate, and they all lined up, to the half second basically with everything. So I put that together. I've got all the black box recordings on my website, so people can see. They can go in there and look at it. Especially when airline pilots look at this thing, they go, "Holy smoke! How in the world, did they know how to do that?" So it's very obvious to me that they had a Boeing instructor and Boeing airplanes, and there was no doubt about that. For instance, I tried to fly the pattern of American 77, the one that hit the Pentagon, and I flew it, 300 miles to the west is where this Hani Hanjour, who was the pilot, he was a Saudi guy from the same hometown as the Prince Bandar, who was documented as funding this operation through the Riggs Bank. That's a whole different story. But at any rate, he took the airplane from 300 miles west, made the perfect turnaround. Of course, that was a pretty easy one there, because he was going west, so all he had to do is basically reverse course, for his navigation.
Yep.
So then he came back into Washington. He came over Dulles Airport around 9,000 feet. He clicked the autopilot off at 7,000 feet, and you can see he kind of waved it a little bit. But that's I can't imagine flying that airplane single pilot. I rely on my co-pilot. You're basically a two-headed, four-armed monster in the cockpit of one of those airliners, and you're checking and cross-checking, and we have all types of procedures that we're watching each other. You can't, almost doesn't cut it in the airline business. I almost got to 7,000 feet. I leveled off at 6,000. Yeah, well, that's great, but you just killed 500 people. You know, it doesn't cut it. But at any rate, he clicked off the autopilot at 7,000 feet, came over he's coming right at the Pentagon. He had he too had National Airport locked in on his navigation. So on a beautiful day like that, he could pick up the target visually. And when he did that, he came over the Pentagon. He was way high. He was at 7,000 feet, and the Pentagon's not that easy to spot really from the air. It's kind of spread out building, and there's a lot of other buildings in the area. You really have to know what you're looking for. And you know, he came down 7,000 feet, and he did a steep descending turn and rolled out at 2,500 feet with the Pentagon in the windshield in front of him. Now, think about what was going on at that time. They just killed 2 pilots. It was a murder scene. It was chaos. It was... I can't even imagine trying to stay focused in a situation like that. But this guy, you know, had the situational awareness to roll out at 2,500 feet and started diving towards the Pentagon. And then he pushed the throttles up to the firewall. Now, when I tried that in the simulator, you know, I'm a pretty big, I'm 220 pounds, 6'3", 220, something like that. I could not hold the yoke down because those engines produce something like 60,000 pounds of thrust each.
Yes.
So that thing's climbing like a bat out of hell. So the only way, so I actually missed it on the first, I was 1,000 feet and climbing when I went over it the first time in the sim. It took me 3 tries to hit or 4 tries actually to hit the building. And the only way I could do that was to start trimming the nose down before I pushed the throttles up. So according to the official, or according to the intelligence community, let's say, this was this guy's first time in the cockpit of a 757.
Yeah, sure.
I don't think so. So,
well,
you know, that leads me to believe that, hey, somebody trained him. Hey, can I find any evidence that, you know, someone trained them? Well, when I found the Congressional Joint Inquiry report and learned that as soon as these guys hit the ground in Los Angeles on January 15th, you know, they were met by employees of the Saudi Aviation Authority.
Really?
And they were connected to a company called Dala Avco, which is a Saudi operator, kind of a contractor for the Saudi government that operates Boeing airplanes. So that tells me right there, it's like, oh, there it is. I found, you know, where they got instructors from, and I found out where they got the manuals from, and the expertise that was needed to fly this particular mission. My next step was, okay, now I need to find an airport, and I need to find airplanes. And all the reports, the FBI guys were following these guys out into this triangle out in Arizona. And I started looking around out there for, you know, they have these storage airports. The banks, you know, own most of the airplanes that are leased by the airlines. And sometimes in between these leases, they're parked at these storage airports. And one airport really started to stick out. It had 757s and 767s parked on the field in the summer of 2001.
Really?
And it was a CIA airport from back in the Air America days. So that really started to raise some red flags. And then on top of that, there was the number 3 guy who was appointed, number 3 guy at the CIA who was appointed by W in June of 2001. His firm was the one that was placing all these bets, trades on the airlines that went down. He had put options on 2 airlines, or he didn't, but his firm did. So there was a connection there. Jeremy Scahill is a investigative author that wrote extensively about Pinal Air Base out there. And, that's where these guys disappeared to. That's where they were. That's where the FBI reported seeing them out in the Arizona desert. And at the same time, the head of the Saudi intelligence, the longtime guy, Prince Turki al-Fawzl, was in the area. He was up in Las Vegas. He was in the same desert.
Gotcha.
About 100 guys that disappeared, or they flew out about a week after the attack.
Understood.